Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a Q&A episode. I have four questions I'm going to dive into, so let's dive into them. Actually, first, before I go into that though, if you want to know more about a body recomp, how to do it, 10 things you need, two different types of body recomp, why it's important to focus on body composition over just scale weight, then my free checklist is for you. The link to that is in the show notes, and I did recently update it, so there are a few updates in there. So if you've had it in the past, definitely time to go back and check it out. Let's dive into today's question. I had somebody recently bring up metabolic adaptation, so I wanted to just hit on that and just some misconceptions around metabolic adaptation, and then maybe some signs of, hey, is this something that you're still dealing with, how we can potentially get around it, and everything like that. I want to go over five things with metabolic adaptation. So first, what is metabolic adaptation? I feel like this was definitely a hot topic, not so much now, but definitely in the past. And so what it is essentially, it's a mechanism from a physiological standpoint where when so the definition that Trexler and colleagues had back in 2014 in the study was, or in their paper was, metabolic adaptation aims at decreasing energy expenditure, improving metabolic efficiency, and increasing cues for energy intake. Essentially, your body becomes more efficient with the energy you give it. And so this is going to be most pronounced when you are in a energy deficit. Okay. So when we are seeing our weight trend down and your body senses that, like, okay, hey, there is not as much food coming in, we're not getting the energy we need, we're having to take from stored energy on the body, your body starts to be like, okay, what's going on here? So you're going to have that drive to want to eat more, you're going to be hungrier, but then also your body's going to start to become a bit more efficient with the energy that you are expending, right? So you may find that for the amount of calories you were expending when you were at maintenance, maybe that's a little bit lower for any given movement that you do. You may find that your body slightly decreases its resting metabolic rate, which is essentially how many calories you burn at rest for basic bodily functions. And then obviously things like NEAT can also go down. And typically with NEAT, that's going to be things that are more subconscious in nature. And if you don't track your movement, you may find that you just naturally tend to move less when you lose weight. Okay, so that's metabolic adaptation, where things will start to adapt down within the given amount of, again, if you're in an energy balance. For some people, this is a bit more pronounced. For some people, this is a bit less. And so again, it's just really a survival mechanism. In today's modern environment, most people don't have to worry about not having enough food coming in. But thousands of years ago, this wasn't the case. And so your body has these natural sort of defense mechanisms of, hey, if we're not going to be getting food for extended periods of time, we need to be able to conserve our energy so we can survive. And so you can see where there's this mismatch now of thousands of calories are easy to get. It wasn't the case back in the day, but evolution doesn't necessarily happen within a year. It takes an extended period of time. So our bodies are very good at defending against periods of an energy deficit, and the body will adapt. And so again, you could be, let's just say, for example, maybe you plug in a calculator, 1,800 calories is your deficit. Maybe you're dropping some weight there, and then you get to this point where you get to a certain body weight, or maybe you're not expending as much energy, whereas now 1,800 calories is either a less of a deficit, so you're not losing as much weight, or it can get to the point to where it's like now there's no deficit. Again, so the energy outside of things goes down, and so now instead of being in a 500 calorie deficit, you're in a 250 calorie deficit, would essentially would mean that your weight rate of loss would be slower. So your metabolism has downregulated. It's adapted to what's been going on there. It's never going to get to the point to where it goes down to zero. But, the big issue I feel like at play, where maybe this is something that hurts people long term, is they get in this kind of metabolic at a state where they're low calorie, their body adapts to that. And then they have this short period of time where maybe they increase their caloric intake in a very short amount of time, and maybe their body doesn't necessarily catch up. And then they're like, oh crap, my scale weight goes up. I need to eat really low calorie. Or they try to maintain this super low weight and they never want to see their scale weight go up at all. So they feel like they need to eat 12. I'm just making up numbers here. They feel like they need to eat 1,200 calories all the time. Otherwise, they gain weight. And they're like, and then somebody does this for extended periods of time, and they get in their mind that their metabolism is adapted. Maybe it is right now, but as we'll talk about here, it's not necessarily like a sentence of you're going to always be that way. And there's some things that people do that typically get them in trouble. But the biggest problem that I see here is people get scared to see their weight come up at all, and then they get caught in this kind of perceived lower maintenance calories than what they would actually need there. So I want to go over five things with it, and this will answer a lot of the questions around metabolic adaptation. And then I want to go over how do you know if you still have this adaptive metabolism, and then we'll talk about other things here throughout. So number one, it's not going to be the reason you aren't losing weight. Okay, so many people think it's something that causes you to not lose weight. It's not true. You can still lose weight. It just may cause a bit more friction or slow things down slightly. So as we talked about, maybe 1800, like it's never going to get to the point to where I feel like it's going to go down so far to where, again, we would have some wiggle room here. Like it's just going to maybe, like I just said, add a little bit more friction, but it's not going to be the sole reason somebody cannot drop weight, because we could theoretically, like for some people, there could be a lot of friction in the process, and for some people a little bit less. But in most cases, it's just going to slow things down a little bit, right? So you may end up with, say, 0 to 5 pounds less weight loss than someone else, or it takes you a few extra weeks, right? Adherence ends up really being the biggest reason why people struggle to lose weight over time, not metabolic adaptation. You have multiple things going on here. You have, yes, maybe a slightly adaptive metabolism. So, now you have a little less wiggle room. As we get further into fat loss, you're just less motivated. You're less motivated to do the things that you need to do. Plus, with today's modern environment of hyper palatable, calorically dense foods, it's super easy to consume an extra 200, 300 calories without really feeling like it, right? So you may subconsciously eat a bit more and not realize it because of the type of food that you're eating. And you also have maybe 100 calories of metabolic adaptation going on. I'm just making up numbers here. Now it's like you're in a 50-calorie deficit. That's going to be super slow. So you get this perceived thing that you're plateaued because of metabolic adaptation, but really there's some other things going on at play here. There's other factors. And then lastly, not only are you less motivated, we have all these hyper palatable tasty foods, but you're also going to have that drive to eat more. Everything's going to taste a bit better, making everything else even worse, right? And when you do have these calorically dense foods, it's tougher to moderate them. So again, there's just a lot of things going on, and adherence really ends up being the big thing at play for most people. But as I said, some people can get themselves stuck in this long term, and we'll talk about why that is. Number two, it is temporary. And this is what a lot of people struggle with. This isn't lifelong sentence of, oh crap, you were low calorie for a year and now you're never going to be able to get your metabolism back up to what it was. That's not the case. It really is only something that shows up when you are in an energy deficit. Once you get back to your maintenance calories are higher, most of the issues are going to be gone because your metabolism is very adaptive to the energy balance. So if you're constantly in this kind of caloric state, your body will adapt down to that. But then there's that period of time where it's like you do need to see your scale weight maybe come up 0 to 5 pounds in order to get back to normalcy on there. But once you go back to maintenance and you do slightly increase your calories, your body will adapt back up to that. Just like it has mechanisms to adapt on the way down, it does have mechanisms to adapt on the way back up when you increase calories. Now, the body's not as good at going back up. It's going to be less likely to defend against weight gain. It's going to be like, okay, maybe we'll be a little bit more wasteful with energy here. Having a little bit of this extra energy that we're going to store in our body may not be the worst thing in the world in case we have this period of time where we're going to be in this deficit again in the future. Again, this is going to be very dependent on the person. Some people are going to see a bit more decreases than others, or a little bit more increases than others. Some people, and so it really does depend on the person, but just understand that it's temporary. And a lot of people forget that what we do in terms of bringing energy in is going to have an impact on energy out. And same thing, energy out is going to have a little bit of an impact on energy in as well too. It's dynamic. It's not just a static, like you bring in 1,800 calories, it stays the same on the energy out. Like both of them are going to be at play here. And I think a lot of people just forget about that. So just understand that it's a temporary thing. It's not something that you're always going to have to worry about. Now, again, where it can become problematic is if you are scared to never increase your calories. That's where you can run into some potential issues there. Another kind of thing at play that can happen here with this is somebody does crash diet. Maybe they do see a little bit of a adaptive metabolism to that. And then they go in an effort mode where they're just like super hungry, low energy. And they're like, this sucks. I'm just going to do whatever. They go on 2, 3, 4 week, for some people, year long, multiple years, decades of not focusing on their nutrition, not focusing on habits, and they see weight come on, and then they think it's because my metabolism was adapted when I crash dieted. But it's more the things that you're doing afterwards that are going to be the big thing at play there. Again, you also will see that happen. It's more so the habits afterwards that are the big issue. So number 3 is we can offset it / lower its impact through your methods. Not saying that you can completely, because having your metabolism adapt down to your energy in like side of things is somewhat genetic. Again, some people are going to have a larger adaptive metabolism. Some people their metabolism is going to be a little bit less. However, there are some things that we need to focus on that we can do to maybe help offset it. It's maybe not going to be 100% guarantee that this is going to work, but these things can definitely help to mitigate this potential thing of your metabolism adapting down. Weight train. So making sure you're weight training during energy deficit is going to help your body maintain muscle. And muscle is energy costly to build, maintain, and to keep, and helps from a body comp standpoint in that it helps your body utilize the food you give it better. It's going to partition more of the energy that you bring in to muscle. Whereas if we're not weight training, we're likely to lose some muscle in the weight loss process. And then that's not going to be great for keeping your metabolism higher there, because the body's going to be like, okay, we're in an energy deficit. Muscle costs a lot to keep. It's taking up a lot of energy. We don't have a reason to keep it because we're not, so and so is not resistance training. It makes sense to get rid of that because we need to conserve energy. So we need to make sure that we're weight training. We want to limit large amounts of weight loss for extended periods of time. Nothing's going to, again, I don't think with this, I think it's more about body fat. I think body fat percentage is the big thing at play. That when we see that trend down, like that's going to be body fat loss is going to be the big thing. And that's more of a concern than your deficit. But in saying that, I do think we can mitigate that, because when we mitigate how large the deficit is, if we're crash dieting, again, we're going to be at a higher likelihood of losing muscle. We're going to have a higher risk of micronutrient deficiencies, which can impact your metabolism and how you feel. You're going to have less energy because you're bringing in less calories. You're going to be less likely to expend more energy because that deficit is large. So there's a lot of indirect things here with the large amount of weight loss. But I do think at the end of the day, the thing that's really going to drive that adaptation downwards is going to be dropping body fat, because that's the energy sensor in the body of, oh crap, okay, we're losing energy here. So that's where some of these mechanisms start to come into play. I don't think it's necessarily the deficit itself that's a big issue. It's more indirect with the large deficit. And again, body fat's probably the big thing at play. We want to eat enough protein. That's going to help with the lean body mass. And you're going to get nice bump in terms of thermic effective food. So if you can slightly increase your protein and or keep it the same, you're gonna maintain that thermic effective food, which is how many calories you burn absorbing and digesting food, and protein has the highest thermic effective food. So we want to eat enough protein. The next is going to be maintaining physical activity. So this is where if you track your steps, you still want to keep the same amount of steps, if not potentially increase it. Like I said, if a lot of people are not tracking this, they'll naturally find that they move less and their overall movement goes down, and that's going to be, you're going to burn less calories by doing that. So we can offset some of that by making sure that we move. And we just want to take some time away from trying to lose weight, and we want to make sure we can eat enough calories, be it maintenance. So you don't want to fat loss diet for years on end, taking more refeed days, taking more diet breaks, maintenance phases, adding in these building phases, which, as I've made the point before, their building maintenance phases can be the same. So we just want to take some time away from trying to diet all the time. If you do these things, the small effects of metabolic adaptation may even be smaller, or they could potentially be non-existent, right? Because I feel like a lot of times it happens because people are not weight training. They're trying to lose weight super quickly. They're not eating enough protein. They're not maintaining their physical activity, and they're always trying to fat loss diet. So these are going to be things that exacerbate any sort of adapt your adaptations with your metabolism. Number 4 is it isn't going to impact everyone the same, and NEAT seems to be the biggest part of metabolism that is impacted. So one, not everyone is going to be impacted the same. So thank you, genetics. Some people are going to have metabolisms that are a bit more adaptive to energy deficits, which again would be a good thing thousands of years ago, right? Like if you have a very adaptive metabolism, you're able to survive, right? Like you're able to survive famine and not having a lot of food. So this was very good back in the day. You didn't necessarily need as much fuel to survive. Your body was really good at conserving energy. You take someone whose body is not very good at that, they need more fuel. And so you could see where that could become problematic when we think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. In today's modern environment, though, it's flipped. Somebody who has a less adaptive metabolism, they're in a good spot because they can consume more calories. And that's very in line with today's modern environment. You take somebody else who has that more adaptive metabolism, they have a little bit more of a mismatch in today's modern environment. And I'm sure there were lots of people who had very high energy needs during times of famine, and they may not have made it, right? So it is a good thing, but obviously in today's modern environment, it can be not detrimental, but it can be hurtful from a body comp standpoint there. So it's not going to be the same for everyone. So we have to understand that it's not this like cut and dry, this is what's going to happen. This may happen, and it may depend on your methods, but then it also may depend on your genetics. Second, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, so NEAT. So this is basically the energy that you burn throughout the day of more like spontaneous subconscious type movement, blinking, fidgeting, general movement throughout the day, things like that. Just talking, thinking, stuff like that. Things that you don't necessarily, yes, you could potentially control. Like I could sit here and fidget a bit more, but a lot of times we're not thinking about those things, and those things can decrease without people really realizing it. And that can make up anywhere from 100 calories to upwards of, I don't know the exact numbers here, but I feel like I've seen anywhere from even north of 500 calories per day. Yeah, so that's pretty significant. And this also is very genetic, and it probably goes into the first part of what I said here. So just understand that it's not like your like it's more, and again, when you think about it, it's your body's trying to conserve energy. So it's going to be like, okay, those are easy things that we can just decrease right off the bat there, right? Like maybe you're just going to have less energy to fidget, etc. How can we counteract that? You can be aware of that, but then you can also, again, maintain your step count that we talked about, making sure that your physical activity stays up. And then five, my last point on this is we don't need to worry about this. Adherence is what you need to be more concerned about and how you go about your fat loss phases. Those end up being the biggest thing. And then if anything, we need to focus on, okay, how are we going to make sure you eat enough after the fat loss phase? And I think that's where most people end up getting stuck long term is maybe they did try to lose weight or they had this period of time where they lost weight and then now they get stuck at, okay, they're super scared to see the scale weight go up because they heard all these things, or maybe it's happened to them in the past. And now, you're trying to eat 1,200 calories and you don't want to see your scale weight go up. So then you do that 5 days out of the week and then, you're still hungry. And then maybe you have a couple of days where it's like, this freaking sucks to always eat this way. You're also trying to expend a ton of energy through exercise. And then you have a weekend where maybe you're around tasty food or your stress load on the body super high and you end up getting to this point to where maybe you way over consume calories. And then, that can be not great from a body composition standpoint. So I think that's where a lot of people get themselves stuck is a couple things. They try to maintain super low weight for extended periods of time, so they never increase their calories. Then they have inevitably periods of time where they're going to consume a bit more calories. Maybe they see scale weight come up a little bit, so then they feel like your metabolism is adapted because you're trying to eat 1,200 calories all the time because you're scared to see your scale weight go up in any form or fashion. And then you, again, inevitably have times where you're going to eat more calories. And then maybe from a body comp standpoint, that's not the greatest. And the other thing too is people are, because of the environment and the tasty foods, if you also combine that with someone's on the leaner side, they're trying to maintain super low weight, they're missing micronutrient, like they're just having things where it's now they're in this state where it's easier to again overconsume food. But also from a tracking standpoint, like somebody may be tracking 1,200 calories, but with all those things that I talked about, they're consuming way more calories than they think they are there. So that just another thing that could be at play here. All right, so how do you know if you have this adaptive metabolism still? Maybe you're like, okay, I lost weight, I lost it in a very quick way, maybe I've crashed dieted multiple times. Is my metabolism still adaptive? I still feel like it's still there. Am I eating the right amount? So I think some things that would look at would need to be like training. Okay, are you continuing to progress your training? Are you getting stronger? Are you noticing body comp change in terms of, hey, you're building muscle? How are you recovering from training? If you constantly feel drained, like you can't perform like you used to, you may still be under eating calories and you may benefit from trying to increase them a bit more. Low energy, right? That would be something I would look at. If you're constantly low energy, maybe we need to feel your body a bit more. Are you constantly hold? That could be a sign that some things have downregulated that we need to check in there. Scale weight change. Is your scale weight never gone up whatsoever? Is it gone up more than what you feel like it should be based on what you're consuming? Again, these are signs that maybe there still is some sort of adaptation going on and we would need to look into that. And do you just feel like you're still eating super low calories? If that's the case, we would need to see what exactly is going on there. These are all signs that I would want to look into. Okay, can we potentially make some adjustments? And then again, you just need some time. I think if it's been 2 weeks, like that's not enough time. You need extended periods of time and consistency in terms of eating, because I could see it where one person, they're scared to see their scale weight come up, and because that's usually going to be the avatar that falls into this of like they got super lean or they've lost some weight and now they like don't want to see their scale weight come up whatsoever. Like they're very focused on the scale. And so in this scenario, you could see somebody that's like under eating for 3, 4, 5 days out of the week, and then they have 2 or 3 days where they're eating more calories. Like I could see where that could potentially be an issue for some people. So trying to get a little bit more consistency in there, but also again, not being scared to see the scale weight come up a couple pounds in the short term, because a lot of that it's not going to be fat gain, but you're also like putting yourself in this position of you're in this kind of vicious cycle there. So getting away from like micromanaging your scale weight for in the short term there. So what I would do in this situation is I would be looking at, so I would push somebody to go look at my episode 585, optimizing your metabolism. I think that's going to be super helpful. From there, what I would be doing with this person, if you're in this state and you feel like your metabolism is adapted, is we'd be looking at the big picture. Okay, what are you doing from a training perspective? Can we potentially back off the intensity and maybe focus a bit more on not necessarily pushing yourself to try to burn the most amount of calories, but can we potentially decrease intensity and match that up with what's going on? So we would look at training and making sure that the training is geared towards adding some muscle. And again, from a cardio perspective, we're doing some cardio, but we're not just trying to do HIIT style workouts all the time, like making sure that's in line. From there, we're looking at nutrition. Could they improve their meal timing? Could they add a few more calories? Could they add a little bit more protein? Could diet quality improve? I think I already said meal timing, but meal timing from a supplement standpoint, could we potentially add in any supplements? And then from, again, a stress lifestyle perspective, Is there a lot of stress on the body? Where can we take off some of that stress? Maybe it is, hey, you need to eat a few more carbs. That can be a way to take stress off the body. From a circadian rhythm standpoint, can we improve that? Get more sunlight early in the day, less blue light at night? Can we improve sleep? These are going to be things that are going to help get your body in a better state. Because again, if you're in this like high stress load on the body, which, low micronutrient status, circadian rhythm disruption, like these are all stressors on the body on top of high training load. We need to find ways to take stress off the body to get your body to feel like it's okay. I can relax now at this point. But I just see people in this state just push, and then they also have a lot of lifestyle factors that are off that can be improved there. So that's what I would do. And then over time, we're slowly increasing your caloric intake. We're looking at your biofeedback, making sure you're feeling good there. So those would be things that I would do to help this person there. So let me know if you guys have any questions on that. So somebody asked, could my technique be the reason I'm not building as much muscle? And so I definitely think that technique is super important, right? But I do think the quest for this like perfect form can hold people back more. Now, in saying that, form is important, and poor form can certainly hold some people back. I've definitely seen people try to lift too heavy and their technique needs to be worked on a bit. But I've also seen quest for perfect form hold people back more. Typically, what you'll see is men are going to just really push themselves, lift heavy weight, and their technique is garbage and they can improve it. Women are typically going to be on the other end. They're going to be the ones that are going to be trying to go for that perfect form. And so more times than not, I have to push them to push themselves and not worry about every set rep be this like amazing, perfect form. And saying that, there are some guys that still, they are overly focused on form and they could go with a little bit more intensity, and then vice versa. I have had women that need to like work on technique versus pushing themselves. So there are definitely overlap with this, but just generally speaking, that's what I see. But what I like to answer this question, it's in my experience, these things are bigger reasons you aren't building muscle than like your technique. Okay. One, a lack of progressive overload / hard training. You don't need to grind to failure every set, but often searching for perfect form comes at the cost of actually pushing your training. Plus, hard training is hard, so most people have a lot of room for improvement there over the long term, right? So yeah, maybe in a session or two you can push yourself, but can you extend that out over extended periods of time? The tough part of training hard for muscle growth is maintaining focus while you push close to failure without letting your form completely fall apart. So there is this like interconnectedness of you need to maintain your focus, but you need to maintain that focus under some discomfort, and you still need to make sure your technique is in a good spot, right? So that's that overlap there with that. Number two, exercise selection / poor programming is going to be a bigger thing than your technique. So good exercise selection and programming is more important than perfect form. I've often seen this be a big reason why people don't build muscle. So when we talk about exercise selection, we're looking at too many redundant exercises, right? People are doing like the same thing, just like too much of the same type of exercise, even though it's technically a different setup or a different machine or something like that. Maybe they're doing exercises that don't necessarily have a great return on investment for a muscle building standpoint. Or somebody's just doing a bunch of low quality volume, and from a programming perspective, it's just not it's not like the programming is not great. That to me, those are going to be more important than trying to get perfect form. Basically, good enough form is going to be good there. And then three, conditions to build muscle. So getting sleep in check, managing overall training volume plus stress load on the body, eating enough calories and protein, or like making sure you're in a good spot outside of the gym to build muscle, because we do need to have the right conditions to build muscle, right? It's not just go to the gym, lift weights, and you're going to be good. We also need to set the conditions for that. In terms of this, some big rocks for form. We do want to control the weight. You don't have to lift super slow, but make sure you control the weight on the way down. You don't have to go like 8-second eccentrics where you just get more time under tension. That you don't need to do that, but you do need to control the weight. We don't want to decrease range of motion to just lift more weight. And more range of motion isn't necessarily always better either. We need to make sure it's a range of motion that our body can do and that we can access. And lastly, just remember building muscle takes time and it's slow there. So let me know if you guys have any questions on that, but definitely I've seen the quest for perfect form be something that certainly holds people back there. All right, so next question is 3 to 5 exercises per workout enough to build muscle? And I definitely think it is. If we go back to what I just talked about there, like those are the most important things. So are you progressing over time? Are you setting the right conditions for building muscle? Is your training challenging? And again, if it's getting challenging over time, eventually I feel like you'll get to the point where it is challenging. What exercises are you programming? What are those exercises made up of? Like those are the most important things. And then also like 3 to 5 exercises, you could do 5 sets per exercise. You could do 2 sets per exercise, right? So I think that's the wrong question of, am I doing the right amount of exercises? Because it really does depend on what are those exercises and how much of those exercises are you doing. That would be a better thing that I would be looking at. But with what I just said there, those things that I just mentioned in the last question, those are going to be the most important when it comes to building muscle. So you can certainly build muscle with 3 to 5 exercises per workout, but you could also not, because you're doing the same exercises. You're maybe doing a ton of volume, right? Like maybe you're doing 10 sets per exercise and now you have low quality volume. Or maybe you're just doing 1 set per exercise. Maybe that's not enough for you. Again, maybe your sleep is not in check, you're not eating enough protein, and so the conditions to build muscle are not there. And it doesn't matter if you're doing 3 exercises, 5, 6, 7, 8. If those conditions aren't there, it's going to be hard to build muscle. All right, and then so final question here of the day is basically somebody asked, do you think 1900 calories hitting 130 grams of protein is sufficient enough to try and build muscle? I'm 47 kg. So I looked, that's 103 pounds. And so I'm going to, I don't want to necessarily, I'm not going to focus on the exact weight, the calories that this person was asking. I'm more so going to hit on the principle of why I wanted to bring this up and my response to them. So basically the question is like, this would be just, hey, is X amount of calories sufficient to build muscle? Is X amount of calories sufficient to lose weight? And it's just super hard to just say. I can't give somebody an answer. And so again, this is more so like I want people to think about it this way is there's no magic to any certain calorie amount, right? 1900 calories could be vastly different for one person compared to another. So there's no magic to any calorie amount, okay? Like calories they're just one piece of the equation. So it's hard to say, is a certain calorie amount going to be good for X goal? Generally speaking, like, yes, we could have better, like, I could give you, generally speaking, I could say, okay, is 5,000 calories going to be a deficit? In most cases, it's likely not going to be a deficit. I'm very confident in that. But for some people, they expend so much energy because they do whatever they do, and maybe they have the right genetics that for a few people, 5,000 calories could potentially be a deficit. Now, that's on the extreme. That's why I'm very confident that for 99.9999% of the population, it's not going to be a deficit. Now we start getting to 4,000. Again, I think for a lot of people, still not going to be a deficit for a lot of people, but probably a little bit more than 99.99%. Maybe we're talking 98.999, something like that, right? Maybe not even that. We get to 3,000. Now we're getting to the point to where that number is going to drastically change there. So we can make some. And then you get to 2000. For some people, 2000 still isn't going to be a deficit, but for a lot more people, 2000 can certainly elicit a deficit. You get to 1500. Again, now this range is, now we're on the other side where for most people, 1500 should be some sort of deficit, but that's not going to be the case for everybody. You can see where it's hard to say because calorie needs are just super individual to the person, but we can make assumptions of that. You're definitely in a better position. So now let's take the muscle building side of things. Is 1,000 calories going to be enough to build muscle for most people? Probably not. 2,000 calories going to be enough to build muscle for people? For some people, potentially. For some people, probably not going to be enough. 3,000, you're probably in a better position here. And once we get into the 4 or 5,000s, now it's in most cases, it's probably going to lead to a bit more fat gain. So you can just see where it's hard to say that off of this amount of, even if I get somebody's weight, it's still just hard to say because again, individual caloric needs are very individual based on genetics, height, weight, current body composition. What does your day-to-day lifestyle look like? Are there, again, I talked about, go listen to episode 585 where I talk about optimizing your metabolism. There's things that we can do to ramp that up. Certain medications can alter it, right? So there's a lot of things at play here to where I can't give somebody enough. And then on top of it, you also have, as we talked about, when somebody's in a deficit, their metabolism may adapt down to that. So that's going to change it. And then on the way up, when somebody's in a surplus, their metabolism may adapt to that. So it's, again, I cannot say with just, hey, this amount of calories, am I going to build muscle? I think 1900 is going to be better than 1500 for most people when it comes to building muscle, but it's also going to be dependent on how much muscle you have now in your current body comp. So somebody who is already on the leaner side and they already have a lot of muscle, is 1900 calories going to be sufficient to build muscle? Probably not. We still have to go back to what is their individual caloric needs? What's their overall movement? So for some people, 1900, maybe they have a low metabolic rate. And so for them, maybe that 1900 is sufficient enough. But again, if they have a ton of muscle and they're super lean, I can guarantee that for most people, 1900 calories won't be enough. What does your training program look like? You could have, let's say 1900 calories is for whatever reason sufficient, but if you have a dog crap training program, you're not going to build muscle. So maybe you have a great training program, but you're not making things tougher over time and your intensity of training is not there. Well, that's going to impact how much muscle you can build, right? What does your recovery look like? Are you recovering? Because if you're not recovering, maybe you need to consume more calories there. What is your recent dieting history? Are you someone that just came off of a big deficit? Have you been in a surplus for a while? That would be another thing that I would need to know there. And so I'm not trying to pick on this person per se. It's just, I just see a lot of people like really focus on the caloric amount and they lose sight of the inputs that actually matter and then things that are also going to alter if that caloric amount works. And so these are things that people overlook. And I think this is things that most programs overlook. And so this comes back to what I've talked about the last couple of weeks. If the state your body's in is ultimately going to what approach we take. And you can't make these blanket statements of 1900 calories is enough. It's not enough. It really could depend on the person. So, if you're someone who you don't have a lot of muscle, you have a little bit more body fat, and 1900 calories is around your maintenance, then that could be sufficient to build muscle. But if you have a ton of muscle, you have your energy expenditure is north of 3000 calories per day, and you're on the leaner side, 1900 calories is certainly not going to be enough there. Now, again, someone that's 103 pounds, you're probably going to we can have a range of probably where we can assume your surplus is going to be. And so I think at 1900 calories, you're definitely in a better state than if you were consuming 1200 calories there. So hopefully that makes sense. And hopefully this gets people to understand that there is no magic calorie amount and you have to look at these other things to see. And especially when it comes to building muscle, people really put a lot of focus on the energy balance that they're in or the amount of calories that they're consuming when, again, like putting yourself in the right conditions to build muscle, making sure that you are pushing your training and that your program is good. Like those are going to be more important things when it comes to building muscle. But you can certainly undereat calories and that's going to impact your muscle building. So if you have the perfect program, you're making things tougher over time, and you're eating 1900 calories and that's putting you in a deficit, you could still potentially build muscle, but it's not going to be as good as if you were at maintenance or a small surplus, right? So these are things that we also need to consider. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any follow-ups to this. Drop your questions over on Instagram. You can give me a follow, Jeff, HOEHN_. That's where I'm most active on social media. And if you found this podcast to be helpful in any way, if you could leave a rating and review. And that's it. Talk to you guys soon.